Alrighty. It's been a while since I've done a story review. Rather to say, I've only done one for Canto 9, and well, that panned out a specific way that people still hold grudges over. Anyhow, Finding Threads has been out for a few days, and having played it on release, I suppose that's enough time for me to process my thoughts on it. Let's start with a quick recap then, shall we? After the events of Canto 9, there were a few loose ends that desperately needed tying up. To shortlist them all, we've got Gregor's transformation, the Roach Emperor, and further trauma related to said transformation. Sinclair's sign, a certain Sinclair's manifestation, and the possibility of stealing much stronger future selves. Kira's survival. Well, she's surprisingly survived bisection, so the Zoomer lives. The House of Spiders. The whole-ass ring-style corridor there for the taking. The Arayashiki. The completed version was present for a moment, now with Arya as the sheaf. Ryoshu's memories. Arya has been torn clean out of it, though Dante remembers her at least. Aside from that is the stupid false question from the Giselle shaft, and the very clear betrayal of the LC by its higher-ups. Surprisingly enough, everything but the final point on this list is covered in this Intervallo, and while it's done to varying degrees of coverage, all of it is rather well done. Now, if you haven't yet read over the Intervallo for yourself at this point, I recommend doing so now, as we'll be diving into spoiler territory rather quickly throughout this video. Once you're done, you can come back and fight me in the comments. Without further ado though, the Intervallo opens up real soon after the events of Canto 9, and just after the reconstruction efforts shown off in the Walpipi mini-story. We open with a funeral for Martin and the other LC members who didn't survive the raid. The scene is fantastic in showcasing people's view on mortality within the city. None of the sinners have really had to process a proper funeral before, Kafi was standing. That being said, we get a strong reminder of Canto 6's events, showing how nonsensical they seem without the linchpin behind it that was Kafi. Concept of which is still erased and hard to retain by all sinners besides Heathcliff and Dante. All that to say, no one really knows how to properly handle a funeral, and those that do just know the motions of it, such as Musso, who is aptly guiding the sinners through what is expected. Aside from that, we get to see Alyssa return for a bit. Well, long enough to show she's alive and on PTO. As the funeral wraps up, pretty much everyone is back to work. Researchers flood through to take away Sinclair, as they all wish to conduct research upon the sign. Allegedly, Hohenheim and the LCE blocked many other more invasive departments from spearheading the research, letting Sinclair retain more of his rights as a human rather than guinea pig. Many of the rest of the sinners part ways to different parts of the facility at this point, while we're left with a select few. Hohenheim approaches us to get together a team for a special assignment, though negotiations are troublesome as the remaining sinners are difficult to say the least. Roshu steps in to translate and takes some joy in using Sangria to mess with translating Dante's tics and tocs. Don is made to step in to clean up the mess, but manages to stuff that up as well. Finally, Faust, tired of the bullshit, steps in reluctantly. The group then goes off to grab their last member for the special operation, that being the recently recovered Kira. We see the levels of importance placed on her recovery and treatment accordingly, offered rather high-end medical equipment, and a private ward in order to recover. While at first she isn't the most cooperative, especially at Hohenheim's spite for her, she's eventually convinced to join along, in order to supplement her continued survival. From here, we head straight to the House of Spiders, wherein we meet with Wayfarer Corp representative Alan. They're a no-nonsense business-minded individual that, while lower on the totem pole of Wayfarer Corp, seems rather ambitious about said corporation's future. They are the aspiring W Corp, as Limbus Company is the aspiring L Corp. Anyhow, Kira isn't the most cooperative and gets slugged rather hard for it. Before more HR violations occur, Hohenheim steps in to dissolve the situation before things escalate. Regardless, the operation is simple. Map out the corridor left behind by the House of Spiders' destruction. There are many doors that lead to an ungodly amount of potential places, and even some that may deposit operatives into the void. Plus, in order to guarantee their safety and properly map out the corridor sections, Wayfarer Corp has come in to conduct research and analysis while mapping out the various routes. Anyhow, on offer is two different routes, one proposed by Kira and one proposed by Roshu. Taking Roshu's option, we find ourselves in one of the ring's galleries, specifically a main studio of the School of Volvism. While there's initial wonder and curiosity at the various exhibits and displays, it quickly turns to dread and horror as Hohenheim urgently calls for a lockdown of the door in order to get to safety while stopping pursuers. their horror is definitely founded, as Emile Benoit, a maestro of Fauvism, rocks up to secure Ryoshu and the Arayashiki. While a stand is attempted against the maestro and their forces, Don is quickly turned to paste as Kira barely fends them off and Ryoshu finds herself unable to draw the Arayashiki. The order to withdraw is made as the remains of Don are grabbed and the team begins to flee. Kira sees their impending demise and resigns themselves, but is pulled back to reality and allowed to live despite the additional danger posed by letting her return surrounded by ring Fauvists. On the other side of the door, ring Fauvists have poured through and the sinners are grossly outnumbered. Dante makes a quick call over the radio and draws upon Durante to pull all the remote sinners over to fight off the horde of Fauves. The swarm of students is disposed of, and while Kira makes a few complaints here and there, they slowly come to realize the full gravity of their situation. Anyhow, the topic of Ryoshu's sword needs to be addressed. Thus, we find ourselves at the forward base of the LC within the House of Spiders. Therein, we reconvene with the other sinners and learn of research on Sinclair. We get a few more character moments as well, notably for Sinclair, Vespa, Charon, and Virgilius. Rather, everyone in the scene at least gets something. The major inclusion here regards Shin and Meng. We're given more of a rundown of its mechanics and how it works, notably the emotional stability required, the power inherent in it, and the costs that it may bear. We're also told that the sinners in their current states may find it difficult to manifest outside of identities that have already managed to do so, closing out quite a lot of speculation on this power system. Moving along though, Ryoshu's blade gets an analysis done upon it, wherein it is found that the scabbard is at fault less than the blade itself. We see it twitching quite often whenever referred to, or acting out like a child whenever relevant to Ryoshu herself. Arya is very much alive within and able to respond to the happenings of the outside world in some means or another, mostly in bouncing around and acting like the sheaf has a mind of its own. Well, I suppose it does. Moving back into operations though, a few more sinners join up, notably Otis and Heathcliff. Kira is notably more cooperative as she reveals more of the doors and does her best to make herself useful, fighting alongside whenever we encounter more adversaries. The next notable door we go through regards Saru, the first fetter made by the House of Spiders in order to keep Ryoshu in check. Ryoshu remisses on the dog as well as Callisto's contributions to her education. All in all, though clumsy and corporism obsessed, he did his best as a father figure. As they return from a few more doors, we are suddenly faced with more Fauvists. They are here to steal away Callisto's works, allegedly for profits. Posthumous dead artist effect, I suppose. There'll be recurring adversaries throughout the rest of the Intervallo. After we deal with the ring's corridor, we move onto that of the middle, wherein Kira is particularly useful in mapping out the corridor's doors. Here we get what is probably the most nasty extension of a nurse father's story. While Kira and Ryoshu bond over their understanding of Matthias, they find themselves at a certain hair salon deep in Middle Territory, the very same hair salon that Ricardo frequents and Heathcliff stole hair coupons to. Ryoshu is reminded of her wishes to attend school. It's a lot. He goes to a ring academy for a bit as a child, not quite mingling amicably with the rest of the students. At one point, it results in a mildly violent altercation wherein she gets in a little fight, a spat between sniveling kids, working out their differences. As she returns to the house though, Matthias finds out about the spat and goes far overboard in rectifying the appropriate vengeance. He comes to class before Ryoshu and cuts through the teachers in front of a class of horrified kids. The scene is needlessly traumatizing for all involved, besides Matthias, who believes he's doing the right thing. Yeah, he's a fuckwit for this, easily shooting him down into the territory of worst dad. Rather than being given a more redeeming story like Callisto or some of the others we'll soon see, he goes straight to the bottom for his overcorrection here. Anyhow, surprise surprise, ring Fauvists pop up, and due to being in Middle Territory, we're shot back into the Middle's corridor to fight them on more neutral ground. We call the sinners through Durante again and fight them down to the last man. Afterwards, we move along to the Thumbs corridor, and man, we get the whole rehab spiel for the bug guy. Gregor gets his moments here as he confronts some of his inner demons and gets to face a part of his past through one of the doors. Anyhow, Moses and Hongers are here to guide him through his counseling. Hongers has a lot of wisdom to offer, having passed through his turn, and Moses having plenty to regard the Smoke War herself. Beyond there, we're shown that which colludes with Valencena's favorite door, the one she went between the most. That being a rather decorative, chained-up door. Allegedly, it leads back into the smoke war and her exploits on the field of battle. It has Valencena's happiest days, by the seam of it, as she went about hunting down G-Corp soldiers, only driven down by a femme consigliere, driving her back into the pits of abuse, alcohol, and despair. This door is decidedly opened by Gregor in an effort to reconcile with the fact that the smoke war is over, that it really has ended and it's time to move on. Keep on living and whatnot. The door leads into an office. Just a normal corpo office, one could find anywhere in the city really. But this office is Gregor's old workplace. He goes a bit over his history with it before coming face to face with one of his former colleagues, a fellow who was amicable with Gregor during his post-war days. Unrattled and unfazed, Ted lets Gregor process through some of his trauma and lets him know that not everyone he has encountered has been left with a poor impression, or worse off than without. As we return through the door, we get Otis face to face with some oncoming Forvus once again. Plus cue another fights with the Forvs. After the fights, we move along to the next part of the corridor, that being the index one. The rest of the sinners reconvene with the group now, as being summoned was not the most ideal scenario for a good chunk of them. Yi-sung having a particularly horrifying moment, whereas Rodya found themselves with a face full of whipped cream each time. Regardless, here's our first proper look into the fates of the apprentices erased by the Arayashiki. They remiss on Sora for a bit, Kira having a few nice memories with them, but otherwise being unable to fully recall who she was, or rather the concept of Sora to begin with. While the hazy memories and void remain ever prevalent regarding those struck down by the Arayashiki, we begin investigating the index doors and, well, the one we find ourselves in is quite familiar to anyone who has read Index Yi-sung's Uptai story. It's a dungeon with various corpses and cells, specifically tied into making the fulfilling of prescripts demanding certain features easier to fulfill. Here we butt heads with some Index proselytes as we attempt to go upstairs from this creepy basement. It's an Index fight, alright, with everyone targeting the same sinner and trying to focus them down. Good to have more finger mooks to deal with anyhow. Well, besides more Forvs. Clearing through them, we find ourselves in an abandoned dwelling, wherein the family must have been killed off or otherwise escaped urgently. It's not the most pleasant affair to explore, as the sinners put together the pieces. While the full picture isn't put together by anyone there, we are given huge hints towards who the former inhabitants may have been through a child's drawing of waves. Very clearly to the audience, this was Rian's old abode, the family he had before, destroyed by the prescripts and haunting him ever since. As we return, there's only one more corridor to go through, that being the Pinky Nurse Father's Shiromi. Though far longer dead compared to the rest of them, here lies plenty of memories for Ryoshu to remiss over, including several tied to Arya. In addition, there's mention of Ren by Kira and Dante both, but as he had been erased at the conceptual level, it is hard for the rest of the sinners to wrap their heads around. While Ryoshu remembers some of the good times, the party comes face to face with the ring one last time. This time, rather than just students, we get a docent of the ring, Rufo. Docents are the middle rank of the ring and usually involve curators or those more involved in the running of exhibitions and the guidance of students. They're much more informed about a school's happenings and are very ingrained into its practice. In the case of Rufo, she is definitely a wild beast of a force and debates Roshu about art, even trying to elicit her membership to Fulvism. When negotiations break down over their differing opinions on artistic merit, we come to arms, leading to a pretty fun boss fight revolving around status effect management and careful clashing. As there isn't strictly just one opponent during this fight, a lot of AoE strategies get mileage here. Anyhow, with Rufo taken care of, the last act is to tear down the door leaving the Pinky Nurse Father's corridor, functionally stranding the LCB within. While there's talk of waiting things out to get rescued, Roshu proposes a more elegant solution in just cutting their way through with a new path. While there's some objection to her using the Arayashiki, especially by Heathcliff, she eventually convinces all those involved to let her release it before erasing away some precious memories and less important ones. Regrouping with the Wayfarer team, they talk business for a short bit, wrapping up their collaboration. Alan speaks on the company's ambitions and seeing that the current W Corp, while in freefall, is still standing. The logical conclusion is that a war of the wings is bound to break out at any moment to usurp them. Of course, he's talking from the perspective of a grunt on the ground, so there's no telling what may actually happen in the long run. We fast forwarded to analysis on the blade and scabbard, coming to the conclusion that Arya has a way of manipulating which memories can be ousted as payments for the blade's usage. While it takes time to compile, pick and choose which to do away with, The ability to select which is seen as majorly beneficial. While the further loss of memories pertaining to Arya is a little painful to stomach, the scabbard itself is optimistic in one day rebuilding the link between them, and thus we end most of the Intervallo's events on a pretty optimistic note. Finally, we return to the bus. It's been a bloody long time since we've been here, the sinners missing their abodes. Hohenheim and Kira both see them off. While Kira's fate hangs in the balance, she more or less adds Roshu to a found family of sorts, wishing to hear from her in the future. Hohenheim sends them off with some complicated emotions, but otherwise leaves the sinners to their devices. Herein, Dante asks about their next destination. Virgilius gives a more wry smile at the question, before revealing it to be N-Corp, much to a good chunk of the sinners' dismay. Thus ends my rough recap on the events of Twining Threads. Let's start with the good then, shall we? The plot of this Intervallo is notably low stakes. It allows for plenty of characterization and slow, meandering world building, giving things plenty of room to breathe. This is easily one of the beefier Intervallos in terms of story crumbs and tying up of loose ends. Speaking of which, pretty much all of the loose ends mentioned at the start of the video have been tied up quite neatly here. Gregor's transformation is addressed alongside his prevalent traumas. Sinclair's sign is touched upon by the researchers. Kira is brought pretty cleanly into the fold. The House of Spiders alongside the deeper secrets are explored, and Roshu's memories alongside the Arayashiki are all addressed in an elegant manner. Beyond that, the crumbs of lore and story tidbits we get throughout this Intervallo are weaved in pretty well, I'd say, with the exception of one, but we'll get there later. Notably though, the elaboration on Shin and Meng, alongside how it is basically hearsay, but a very real technique. This feels a little more akin to, say, the teachings in Log Horizon, wherein you're not strictly worse off by not having them, but being able to utilize them does make a major difference if you have access to them. It also goes over why Matthias, of all Nurse Fathers, was incapable of utilizing it. On the subject of extra lore, Wayfarer Corp is an excellent addition, especially to integrate the falling trust and value of the current W Corp and their warp trains. Compared to the horrifying mumbo-jumbo of taking warp express trains, Wayfarer's use of the corridors and doors is far more elegant seeming, at least on the surface. They hint at a significant price being paid to make use of said technology, but that is something to look forward to, I reckon. As for the elephant in the room, the Folves. Getting to see a School of the Ring in action is really cool. Not only do we get to see an exhibition, but we also get to see members all the way from student up to maestro in a pretty clear-cut manner. They're not a weird exception to a finger like Lei Heng or the rest of the Nurse Fathers, but straight up just a real prominent force in the finger themselves. The School of Folves paints a far more competent image of the ring in comparison to that which we got with the Pointillists in the basement or the previous ring identities. They're a vast, sprawling organization with very powerful members and an impact that is definitely felt through both the docents and maestro. Beyond there, each Nurse Father's additional depth adds a good amount of characterization to each. While the added characterization isn't equal with all of them, the latter three being the weakest, Callisto and Matthias needed the most, and they both got their stripes here. Notably with Callisto being a very encouraging and supporting father figure in Roshu's pursuit of student life, and Matthias' self-absorbed pride and wanton destruction of said potential. It paints the Disney father as the worst, while elevating the corpse father into a genuinely swell guy, giving us a fairly juxtaposed impression compared to the reception we got out of Canto 9 at first. Moving past those two, Valentina is given more moments of light alongside her apprentice Lucio. We get confirmation of Lucio's plans to be free of Valentina, alongside the interactions between the apprentices being far more than just underling. I look forward to seeing the FUM IDs more with what we've thus been shown. As for the Index, well, finally getting to fight Index goons is nice, though it's quite late to see them pop up now, really. The proselytes feel very middle tier as enemies, though, and are more than just pushovers, especially with their more unique fighting style compared to other finger goons. Last, in regards to the Pinky, we get a little more regarding Shiromi's attitude towards life, and some more precious moments with Arya. It's nowhere near as much, but as the mysterious finger in hiding, keeping that aura of mystique would prove more valuable, I reckon. Now for the fights beyond, the Ring Folves aren't the nastiest enemies. If anything, they're kind of pushovers and needing status on target to do anything. Whenever they do manage to land hits though, and apply said mold colors, they can spiral out pretty quickly, provided they clash the right opponents. Nowhere can this be seen better than with the ring docent Rufo. Her fights is quite creative in initially starting as a more normal focused encounter and petering out into a wild unchained beast of a fight. The Unbreakables apply status, making it difficult to wrangle away her clashing potential and coin power. It goes quite a ways in making things more difficult, not just having her hit the floor immediately. The second phase is especially horrifying after the critique setup, and her being able to go full sicko mode before going down in something of a blaze of glory rather than a whimper. I've heard quite a few people struggled with this fight in the end, and I can 100% see why. Beyond that, I have to talk about the music. All of the new tracks in this Intervallo are fantastic. I especially like Savagery from the trailer, which pops up whenever the ring folds are deeply involved. Bloody strong theme, especially with the animalistic nature of its later parts. Anyhow, my glazing of the slow character-involved Intervallo aside, these I am far too partial to, considering LCA Checkup and Spring Cultivation were my previous favorites. What did I dislike here? The unfortunate, most obvious one is the reused content. There is a lot of reused content with this Intervallo. While this definitely makes this feel more like a proper epilogue by revisiting the old locations, a good chunk of the assets are just reused from Canto 9. Whether these be backgrounds or fight music, you can really start to feel the stretching of the gameplay in some parts. The Folves are especially criminal of this, as they kinda pop up as they please in an almost, oh no, suddenly Folves kind of affair. While none of them pop up as a random encounter so much as the Tech Libs in Canto 4 or Pekatula in Canto 6, they really do outstay their welcome after some time. Fighting them 4 times without significant alteration does get stale over time. Compare this to, say, Blood Fiends or Blood Bags, which mix in a variety of other subunits, like the Multicracks or different kindreds or classes, and you can feel the difference far more than the Folves, which kinda just palette swap for potency or count. The worst part more so is they're stuck into unfocused encounters for the most part to boot, and after their first encounter, just use the music of the area they happen to land in. While this could be remedied by having other syndicates pour in an attempt to take back parts of the house for themselves, I suppose it just makes more sense for it to be Folves. Nonetheless though, definitely missed potential. Also, yes, while I'm on the point of reused content, it feels like something of a joke to just have the Folves show up in middle territory, to come back over into the middle Nurse Father's corridor, then play the middle's music over them. That much is kinda just bleh. That was the one time they could have really justified having the middle pop up, and they blew it. We could have at least gotten Kira's conflicts having to fight her own would-be brothers and sisters. That would have gone quite the ways for additional characterization to boot. Instead, this feels like we took the route of least resistance. Beyond there, fighting the Index proselytes twice is a bit of a drag, considering they're a focused encounter, and once you've seen their gimmick once, it isn't exactly fun to fight the exact same gimmick again, but just longer and with more of them. Going from fighting 8 of them to 10 of them, an interesting fight it does not make. While them being able to roll up to 5 speed can mess with some compositions, targeting, and interception, it is largely inconsequential since the proselytes themselves don't have enough HP to outlive a competent stagger effort upon them. Then comes Rufo. I actually didn't have too much trouble with Rufo personally, so this point is rather tentative. I can see how she can get quite out of hand, and rather how the stagger threshold is a suggestion rather than an actual stagger. The most painful part is probably the full clearance of all status effects when she phases. That one did piss me off a fair bit, but was ultimately inconsequential to clearing of the fight. I wish she had a little more involvement than just being a stepping stone to wrap up the Folves at the end of the Intervallo, but we can't have everything, I guess. She had more potential as a character, but again, we're talking about potential in a franchise known for introducing and ripping away characters just as fast. If anything, Ruiner is far more criminal in this regard. Speaking of Folves once again though, and this is going to be my last main point, fucking Emil Benoit. I know they needed a cool French-sounding name for the maestro, but could they have not chosen something ridiculously on the nose? This is literally the middle 2 names of Folvism's founder in real life, that being Henry Emile Benoit Matisse. I think I was having an aneurysm when I first saw the name pop up. Was like, no fucking way, they just went ahead and copied it one for one, and well, yeah, they straight up just did. Then turned him into a chick. Speaking of which, I think that's going to be the lasting remembrance of the Folvis. Both Rodya and Rufo have distractingly large chests, and it's Christ, yeah, that's a lot there. I know it isn't brought up that often, but bloody hell, that's a heck of a lot just staring at you while you read. As for the story crumbs beyond those, there was just one I had a bone to pick with. That being the slip of a tongue from Otis regarding the prescripts and their gods. The all but confirms Hermes to be known as a god, which isn't inherently a bad thing since we got that with Rian's skill descriptions, but it is rather maddening how flat the response to such was. None of the sinners react to her slip of the tongue, or less confident delivery in regards to it. Not even Ishmael, who immediately speaks after her. This one is a tad frustrating, but as the caduceus is shown on Otis, I suppose giving the connection some time to breathe here is warranted regardless. Anyhow, that concludes my more nitpicking portion for Twining Threads. Overall, this is a very fun Intervallo to read over, and while the combat is dry and there's far too many reused assets for my liking, I am largely on board for all that this brings to the table for Project Moon storytelling. Being an epilogue first and laying the crumbs for future content, I am wholeheartedly on board with this direction for the next set of stories in this universe. That wraps up my thoughts on this storylet. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like to push it along. Otherwise, if you want to see future content from me, slap the subscribe button and bell icon. It goes a long way in pushing me through the algorithm, especially if you tune into future stuff. If you'd like to support Beyond like Mr. Artie and Derp here, you can go subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. The extra all goes towards feeding the cat and caffeine. Thanks for tuning in or using me as second monitor content. Really appreciate it. Next up will be a one-shot TTRPG stream of my own making. A general reception through the library from the point of view of some very unlucky fixers. That'll be tomorrow night.